Hey guys, it's Nedzo here, and a couple of videos ago, or last video, I did a video ranking my top 100 Formula One drivers in history, and it was eventually just ranking a ton of drivers, and whoever happened to fall inside the top 100 just got the kind of distinction. But in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a bit different. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on a specific decade. So, I've decided to do a video ranking all of the drivers who competed in the 2010s. Now, I will just preface this as saying I couldn't actually find a ranking that had every single driver from the 2010s. This one, as you can see, if I just scroll past the adverts, it says F1 full-time drivers from the 2010s. What basically I've let a look through this. Across the entire of the 2010s, there were 66 F1 drivers. This only has 62, so I'm assuming that was like people like who did one or two races. So Andre Lotterer won't be in here. I assume like people like Christine Klein and Sakon Yamamoto, who did a handful of races in 2010, also won't appear. But for the most part, obviously missing only 4 drivers, and I think I've just named 3 of them. They won't have ever appeared in a significant way, so I don't think we're missing out on much. But basically, I've got my little tiers where we're gonna have a rank. So at the top we have #blessed because we all know who's gonna appear at the top of that list. Number 2 driver, not bad for a number 2 driver. I would have put that in, but the way that Tiermaker formats its things is very weird. It doesn't center the text if you put it in, but in a very long word. So I just put number 2 driver. Good, does what it says on the tin. So does decent, so does meh, so does mediocre, and Rio Haryanto, because he's one of the worst drivers of the 2010s. Probably one of the worst in this list as well. So we've got our 62 drivers here. I'm going to quickly shuffle them around a bit so we don't, because I can see a lot of them are just like the modern ones. I want to just shuffle them around a bit so we can have a bit of an interesting kind of selection. Just shuffle them around a bit so I'm not going for the guys that they want me to rank first. But yeah, so basically these tiers are going to act like S through to F. I will just also say these are my opinions, as it is with all my ranking videos. It's just my opinions. If you disagree, put in the comments how you think I'm wrong, but don't say like, oh, you didn't put X driver in B tier, you're the worst person ever. Well, I know most of you don't do that anyway. And also I will say this is my second ranking video in a row. The reason why I've been doing these kind of live unscripted videos is because I've had a lot of uni work over the past couple of days. Or not the last couple of days, last couple of like month or so. So I think by next video, which should come out in a fortnight time, it should be a proper normal video rather than one that's just recorded and then not really edited that much. So without further ado, we're about 3 minutes into the video. Let's get into this and rank out all of the drivers from the 2010s, 62 of them. So it should be a shorter video than what I'm used to, because I think my last one was like 2 hours and 51 minutes. Anyway, let's get on with it. So first one, Stoffel Van Dorn. Actually a decent place to start, because this is a driver that most people either don't recognise how good he was, or something to that effect. Basically, Stoffel Van Dorn was supposed to become the next, maybe not Lewis Hamilton, but definitely the next big thing when he came through the ranks. Came through GP2 in 2015, had like double the points. He had like 350 points in the championship. The second place guy, Alex Rossi, had about 180. So he had about double the points of the next guy. He won 7 feature races in 2015 in GP2, which I think is a record. In an 11-race season, won 7 feature races. He wasn't that good in the sprints, but he didn't need to be because he was so good. He had like 8 pole positions. He didn't come into Williams. Didn't come into McLaren in 2016. Really, he did Bahrain 2016 for them because Fernando Alonso was injured from his crash in Australia. Got points on his debut in a McLaren Honda. I mean, what can you expect? But I think he went over to Super Formula and did a season there. And then he came back to McLaren for 2017 and partnered Fernando Alonso for every race apart from Monaco, where he was partnered by Jenson Button. And overall, I mean, he did decently well. Obviously, he's a rookie going up against Fernando Alonso. He's obviously going to be kind of, not battered per se, but he's obviously going to get beat, and he did. But it wasn't like an absolute travesty. And then in 2018, he has Alonso as a teammate again, but he just drops off in terms of performance. There was about 4 or 5 races where he qualified last, and that McLaren was not great, but it also wasn't a car that should have qualified last place. There were rumours that Alonso was getting better parts. He lost, I think, 21-0 in qualifying that year. And overall, it was just lost potential for Stoffel Vandoorne's F1 career. He races in like Formula E, and I think he does some endurance racing now. And I think he's also like one of the Aston Martin reserve drivers, along with Felipe Drugovich and Jack Crawford. But they're never going to get a seat with the senile Spaniard in one of the cars, and Lance Stroll in the other. I don't think Alonso's that bad, but he's just not gonna, until he leaves. They're not going to get a chance, and Vandoorne's never going to get a chance, ironically, in Alonso's seat. For now, I will put him in decent, because I think he is kind of not underrated. He's not underrated because people do know he was supposed to be so much better than he was. But people do seem to think he was just a failed F1 driver and it was all because of him. But I think it was also because he didn't have the right mentality. He was too nice. When you go up against Fernando Alonso as a teammate, you have to take it to him. Next one, Marcus Ericsson. I really don't rate Ericsson. I've done a video on both Vandoorne and Ericsson, if you want to go and check those out. But Ericsson came into F1 in 2014 with Caterham. Again, you shouldn't be expecting really anyone to do well in the Caterham, but he got drop kicked by Kobayashi in the first half of the season. Got beat by a second by Andre Lotterer when Lotterer was doing his first ever F1 qualifying session. That was in Spa, and then for the rest of it, he had Kobayashi for most of the rest of the season, and then for Abu Dhabi, he didn't compete because he was already signed to Sauber for 2015. He just wasn't good in 2014. 2015, got drop kicked by NASA. Then in 2016, they give Ericsson all the better parts for the car. They did basically there was this company called Longbow Finance that came in to run the team, or came in to support the team financially, and Ericsson benefited from those because Longbow Finance was basically ran by a bunch of Swedish billionaires, and he's from Sweden, so obviously they were going to favour him. I would put him in mediocre for now. Because he just wasn't that good. And in 2017 and 18, so in 2016 he performed awfully, and that Sauber was awful anyway. But NASA got 2 points with it in Brazil. Ericsson did nothing like that, and it was Ericsson who stayed on for 2017, not NASA. And then their line did better than him in 2017. He got points on merit in Spain, and I think somewhere else. I can't remember what it was. In Baku. Got points on merit in both of those races, whereas Ericsson got none. And then it was Ericsson who still kept on for 2018, and only when he got drop kicked by Charles Leclerc did Sauber / Alfa Romeo. I mean, actually, no, Alfa Romeo was when they transitioned in 2019, but it was only then that they realised actually we need to get rid of this guy. Next is Esteban Ocon. He's good. He's got a race win. A lucky race win, yes, but still a race win. He did well in that Hungary race to not bin it like everyone else did at the start, and held off Sebastian Vettel, even if Vettel wasn't at his peak or anything like that. Good driver, can have arguments with his teammates, but overall, decent driver. I actually just realised this is only ranking them on their 2010s form, isn't it? Because it's 2010s. Yeah, I only rank drivers on their 2010 form. Forgot to say that. So he doesn't have a win. He doesn't even have a podium at this point in his career, so maybe go into decent. Because let me think, he did 2016 half of that for Manor, 2017, 2018, and not 2019 for Force India / Racing Point. So he did 2017 to 2018, and he did good against Perez, so I'll put him in decent for now. Next one is Alex Albon. Oh, this is only 2019, so he does first half of the season with Toro Rosso, does okay, I guess, and then gets promoted up to Red Bull because they wanted to see how he did against Verstappen. Because the reason why they promoted him and not Kvyat was because they already knew what Kvyat could do in a Red Bull, and that was decent, but they wanted to see if Albon could do slightly better. Again, he's a decent driver. I think that the fact that he's only done one season, though, he definitely, even in that one season, showed more potential than Vandoorne ever did. But I might put Vandoorne back down into meh for now. But he definitely did more in that one season than Vandoorne did in his 2 seasons, but he obviously hadn't got the experience that Ocon had. Next is Lando Norris, another debutant, as with George Russell, who we'll come to next. I mean, he had a decent 2019. I think it was better than Albon's. He took it to science, really, especially in the second half of the season. He had races like Spa, where he was fifth on his home turf, you could say, because he's part Belgian. But again, the fact that he has less experience than Ocon means you can't really put him in above him. I much put Ocon in good for now. George Russell, I mean, 2019 was really an anomalous year for him. He had Robert Kubica as a teammate who was nowhere near his early 2010s form or late 2000s form. He was disabled even, and George battered him in qualifying. Obviously, didn't get the point that Kubica got, but overall outperformed him. We have to be honest. I'd probably put him as the best performing rookie of 2019. Decent. There we go. Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc, I'd put. I mean, he obviously had a fantastic 2018, a fantastic 2019 as well. Had, I think, the most poles in 2019 of anyone in that Ferrari. Obviously, it was illegal fuel flow and stuff. But he outperformed Ericsson, obviously. Arguably outperformed Vettel in 2019 as well, if that definitely so. Definitely better than Ocon, I'd say. But because he's literally only done 2 seasons, I couldn't put him in the A tier, or number 2 driver, should I say. Pierre Gasly next. Made his debut towards the back end of 2017 for Toro Rosso. I think he replaced, it was either Kvyat or Sainz. I think he might have replaced, because Sainz departed from Toro Rosso for Renault, I think, at the end of the Malaysian Grand Prix, so for the next Grand Prix, which I think was America. And then it was either Kvyat, no, it was either Gasly or Brendan Hartley that came in. It was very unusual, that stint for Toro Rosso, but I put Gasly. I mean, obviously, he had that poor. He came in there. He had a good 2018 with Toro Rosso, and then obviously got promoted to Red Bull for 2019 and had a very poor start to the season. But then when he got demoted back to Toro Rosso, came back and was basically on his former form. So I think the fact he had more experience in all of these three puts him above them. But I wouldn't put him on the same level as Ocon or Leclerc. I don't think I would, because he just he didn't have the experience. I mean, he did have the experience that Leclerc had. It's just Leclerc did a lot more with it. Giovinazzi, I mean, technically had 2 seasons because he had 2 races in 2017 and the entire of the 2019 season. 2017 was awful. Like 2 races, he was clearly not ready for F1. That's fine. 2019 comes in and he's actually quite mature. Drives underneath Raikkonen's abilities, and obviously Raikkonen was 40 at the time and didn't care about F1 really, but he didn't do horrendously. I'd put him in the meh category below Van Dorn, but I don't think he did necessarily that bad. Lance Stroll, you see, Lance Stroll at the end of 2019 is probably the best stock than he has now even. Obviously had a decent-ish 2017, inconsistent, but he got the podium in Baku. I mean, Massa could have arguably won that race, his teammate, but he got the podium and you can't take that away from him. Outperformed Sirotkin in 2018. I mean, Sirotkin wasn't the best of drivers. And then in 2019, lagged in qualifying to Perez. Wasn't intensely far off in the races. Unfortunately, because it's only the 2010s we're ranking here, we can't get his 2020 season in, which I think is his best season. 2020 was. But he's definitely better than Ericsson, definitely better than Giovinazzi and Van Dorn. I put him at the tail end of decent. So what I'm going to do is, the guys who are further to the left are better. So Leclerc's better than Ocon, Gasly's better than Russell, who's better than Norris, who's better than Albon, who's better than Stroll, kind of thing. Next is Lewis Hamilton. I mean, we've got to put him in. Like, as much as I like to bash on him for being not as good as the other great champions of his era, not of his era, of other eras, he was the best driver of the 2010s. I mean, how many championships? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 championships in the 2010s. So that's just less than half of the championships available. Yes, he had the best car. but still, like he was fantastic in 2015. He was fantastic in 2012. He was fantastic in 2019, I'd say. Um, so yeah, he's got to go up in the top category. I mean, next one is Valtteri Bottas. He's literally a number 2 driver. He came into F1 in 2013, so he has much more experience than anyone apart from Lewis already in this tier list. He was better than Maldonado overall, although it wasn't an absolute stomping for the Finn. Stayed with them in 2014 when they got good. Was better than Massa in 2014 through to 2016. He didn't have the highs that Massa had because Massa had like pole position in Austria 2014. He had a couple of podiums here and there. The main thing I remember Bottas for in his Williams stint was that accident with Raikkonen at Sochi in 2015. But apart from that, he was good. Went to Mercedes in 2017. Did decently well, actually. He wasn't up to Lewis's calibre, but he wasn't exactly floundering. He wasn't meant to be a Rosberg 2.0. He was meant to be a kind of number 2 driver, hence why he's in that category. 2018 was awful. Didn't get a single win, where his teammate got like 9. Although he wasn't like completely... It wasn't like Sergio Perez 2024 awful. And then in 2019, he did decently well, I guess. And I mean, ended the decade on a high because he won Abu Dhabi, I think. Or was that Verstappen? That might have been Verstappen, actually. But, yeah. I think we can easily put him in number 2 just because he has more experience than these guys and at his peaks was better. Sergio Perez next. Or Perez. I'm not sure if Mexican pronunciation is the same as Argentinian pronunciation. But 2011, he made his debut for Sauber. Mostly that season was known for his crash at Monaco, which sidelined him for a race at Canada, where Pedro de la Rosa took his position. Had a very good 2012. Got, 2, 3 podiums that season. One at Malaysia, one at Monza. That got him the seat at McLaren in 2013, but McLaren fell off a cliff from being the best car to being the 5th quickest car because the genius team principal at the time, Martin Whitmarsh, decided that instead of carrying on a winning concept that was flawed because it broke down a lot, but still very good, they decided in their infinite wisdom that it'd be better to start afresh and just completely design a new car that had no link to the 2012 machine. And that worked out about as well as you'd expect because Button and Perez were essentially fighting for like minor points positions for that entire season. Perez was deemed as the worst driver and had a few run-ins with other competitors like Raikkonen at Monaco, Button at Bahrain, so his own teammate at Bahrain. Then it kind of had a career resurgence at Force India. I remember seeing an article in F1 Racing magazine from like the start of 2014 that said that Perez was in the last chance saloon, and he took that chance at Force India and did really well with it. Handful of podiums when Nico Hülkenberg didn't. Obviously, Hülkenberg was more known for his consistency because although he didn't get a podium at all in that Force India stint, he was always up there in 4th, 5th, 6th places. Whereas Perez would kind of peak with the podiums and then get like a 7th or a 6th and not be as consistent overall. But overall, Perez's stint from 2014 through to 2019 with Racing Point, because that was where the end of the decade is, not when he finished racing for them, was very good. He was pretty much always the best of the rest kind of driver, along with Hülkenberg, Bottas from 2014 to 16, those kind of guys. So I'd actually put him above Leclerc, again, because Leclerc only has 2 seasons of experience compared to Perez's 10. 9, sorry. 9 seasons of experience. But I think he wasn't better than Bottas. Bear in mind, he hasn't even got a win at this point. His first one was at Sakir in 2020. I mean, yes, Bottas did have 4 seasons or 3 seasons in the best car on the grid, so he could get those wins. But I do think that... Actually, no, you know what? I will put Perez ahead of Bottas. Next one is Kubica. Tough one, because he has 2 seasons. One is 2010, the other is 2019. So I should do that the other way around. One is 2010, the other is 2019. Fantastic season with Renault in 2010. One of the best drivers that year, arguably top 3 drivers on the grid. Took that Renault to multiple podiums when it shouldn't have even been in the top 5 or even the top 6 at points. Trounced Petrov and was looking good going into 2011, and then he got that rally accident, which basically sidelined him for the rest of the decade. Apart from 2019, he comes back because Polish oil money, literally oil money, comes in and he pays 15 million, I think it was, to Williams, and he gets second seat alongside George Russell. Gets to 1 point, which is fair enough in Hockenheim. He has one performance better than George. But over the course of the season, he wasn't that good. You could argue the fact that he hadn't driven in 8 years at the top level, and that he was disabled. He literally was. He had about, I think he said 70% use of his left hand or right hand. I can't remember which one it is that was disabled for him. I mean, the fact that he even managed to stay in F1, and the fact that, like, it was obviously not up at full fitness. He was, 35 when he came back, which for someone who has disabilities like that is going to make a difference compared to 25, for example. So the fact that he even came back at all and wasn't like, he was there, but he wasn't terrible. Like, he was at points like seconds off of George in qualifying, but that was only right at the start of the season. And then he kind of was like 6-7 tenths away. Not really doing much, but not really doing anything bad either. And then obviously he did get that point at Hockenheim, but George didn't. So, I mean, you got the highs of 2010. If 2010 was the only season, I could have put him in good or number 2 driver just based on that one season. But because of that, I'm going to have to put him in decent. Or do I? Do I put him in? No, I'm going to put him in decent. I'll put him, because he had more experience than George, Lando, and Nemco. I'll put him above them, just in the 2010s. But yeah, that's what I'll do for Robert Kubica. Sebastian Vettel is next. He has to go into #blessed. 4 championships in this decade, and although he fell off, he was never going to fall down to the level of Perez or Bottas. So yeah, obviously not the greatest. Like, if it was going from 2014 onwards, there's an argument to be made about number 2 driver, but he still fought for 2 championships, even if he didn't get them, and mostly his fault. But yeah, luckily the decade cuts off just when he really got bad in terms of driving. 2020, 2021, and 2022 were just kind of that. If it was like 2020s, I would arguably put him as number 2 driver, or even down in good. But luckily, this was his best decade. Next is Michael Schumacher. Now, again, came back from, like Kubica, came back from a break, not a self-enforced break, obviously. Came back aged 41 for Mercedes. Obviously past his prime. Like, no driver has made a comeback at that age. I don't think ever. I'm trying to think if there's any guy like back in the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s. No, Prost did. I forget. Yeah, Prost came back. Actually, no, Prost came back at 39 or 40, because he was born in, Prost I think was born in 1953. So yeah, Prost was born in 1953, so he came back aged 40. So he was even younger than Schumacher was when he came back. And Schumacher in 2010 was, I'd say, on the same level as Rosberg at his best. He had a bit of inconsistency, but he was getting used to the new Bridgestone tyres that he hadn't driven. Like, he'd not driven on slick tyres in Formula One since 1997. He'd not driven those era of cars. Like 2009 was when the first, because it's weird because you had 2 major regulation changes in 2 years. You had 2009 regulation changes, which basically got rid of all the rabbit ears, made the Formula One cars longer, made the aero more detailed, and then 2010 is when they brought in the that wasn't when they brought in the slick tyres. That was, what did they bring in 2010? They changed some like stuff on just the appearance of the cars, made them a bit, I think, smaller slightly, because I think the Brawn was quite long from 2009. They also banned KERS, but there was a couple of other things. But essentially, Schumacher came back to an era of regulations that was completely new to him. He hadn't done practically any racing in the 3 years he'd been away. Whereas, like, for example, when Fernando Alonso took his hiatus, he did Le Mans, he did Indy. Like, don't get me wrong, they're not like Indy's not got no bearance to F1, not the 500, but Le Mans does. Le Mans, like, he's keeping his wits about him. Whereas Schumacher, he did a bit of motorbike racing. He did the Race of Champions. He might have done some promotional things, and obviously said he was going to come back for Ferrari. did a test in a GP2 car ahead of what he was going to do, was come back ahead of Massa for 2009 because of his accident, but eventually never ended up doing that. So I'd argue, yeah. So basically, we're going to 2010. He's decent against Rosberg. I think he was actually really good, considering the circumstances. 2011 has standout moments like Canada, where he's running in the top 2 even for a long part of a race. But 2012 was his best season from his comeback, no doubt about it. I actually did a video on this calling his stint at Mercedes underrated, and I believe that well, I think it was after Monaco. If you basically get rid of all his unluckiness from the start of 2012, so him getting the loose wheel in China, him getting the penalty for colliding with Senna in Spain, even though it was his fault, or not having that collision at all, could have finished in the points. Him starting on pole at Monaco. If you count in all the points that he lost, I think I worked it out that he'd have actually been leading the championship. So at the start of 2012, he was actually the best driver on the grid, kind of thing. I'm just sorting out my hair. Hold on. But yeah, I think that his comeback stint was very underrated. 3 seasons only, obviously, but I'd say that his stint was better than Ocon's stint. Better than Leclerc's stint. Oh, it's one more season, and he wasn't really better in 2010 or 11, so I'd say no. Next one is Mark Webber, the guy who coined this exact phrase, number 2 driver. Kind of a midfield stalwart in the 2000s, but by the 2010s, he's planted himself at Red Bull and is not the number 2. He's not even the number 2 driver. Like, Vettel performed better in 2009, especially towards the end, but Webber was equally as proficient in 2010. I mean, if it wasn't for Korea, he would have won that title. There's no doubt about it. He was more consistent with Vettel, despite the team preferring Vettel over him. Just the Britain saga where Vettel destroys his front wing in practice, and they give the new front wing to Vettel, take it off of Webber's car, and Webber wins with the old front wing. That kind of stuff. People say that Vettel was better in 2010. He wasn't, because Webber was the kind of neglected driver, and he still just about was better, I'd say, over the course of the season, although Vettel won the championship. 2011, obviously, is a smattering in Vettel's favour, and Webber was kind of nowhere. He had 1 or 2 wins. 2012 was better, comes back and has 2 wins at Monaco and Silverstone. And then 2013 is just kind of nowhere and wants to retire. 4 seasons. One of them was championship potential. The next 2 of which were very decent. I'd argue that he was number 2 driver, but I'd say, worse than Perez, better than Bottas. If we're accounting, obviously, if this was including his 2000s form, he'd go ahead of Perez. But there's not that. Romain Grosjean's next. Polarising driver, really. 2012 to 2019. Because obviously his 2009 stint doesn't count, and his post-2019 stint doesn't count. Starts off with a bang at Lotus in 2012, quite literally. He is very quick, but also very crash-prone. Causes multiple first-lap incidents, Spa, Japan, a couple of other ones. And I think he caused, not a first-lap incident, but I think he caused one with Webber and Perez at Abu Dhabi. That rings a bell. 2013 is much more reserved, much more mature, and kind of gets quite a few podiums. Could have won in Kota, but didn't. Stayed with Lotus as they became awful in 2014 and 15. Leaves them before the rebrand to Renault in 2016 for Haas. 2016 is one of those better seasons. Takes them to several points finishes they shouldn't have really got. 2017 was okay, I guess. But by 2018 and 2019, he's basically making tons of errors. Back to his old 2012 form, but without the real pace to match it up. And by 2020, that when he gets booted out, he was going to get booted out anyway, and because of the Bahrain accident, everyone kind of loves him for some reason. He's gone to IndyCar since. This is completely irrelevant to the ranking, but he's gone to IndyCar since and has been. We'll put it as it should be. He's been average at best. Like, people... Oh, my God, that shows off an awful part of my hairline. Let's not do that. So, what was I on about? I was on about his IndyCar stint. 2021, he was kind of... I mean, this is not relevant to the ranking, but people talk about how, oh, IndyCar's so easy. Roman Grosjean's gone there and he's beating everyone. It's like, he hasn't even got a fucking win, you spanner. That's basically what it is. Grosjean went there and he did some dumb... I think at St. Pete one year, he literally spun out and then didn't check before he was rejoining the track and just crashed straight into the side of someone on his rejoin. But yeah, I'd put him above these lot. Just on experience. He was good, better than Ocon because of experience, but not better than Schumacher, even though he does have the experience over Schumacher in the 2010s. Nico Hülkenberg next. Didn't do the entire of the 2010s, missed out on the 2011 season. 2010 he was very good against Barrichello. 2012 beat Di Resta. 2013 beat Gutierrez by a country mile. 2014 through to 16 he's got Perez as his teammate. And isn't that far off, to be fair, if not slightly better in a couple of those seasons. 2017 he's against Palmer and Sainz. He's better than both of them. 2018, I think he was also better than Sainz. 2019 goes up against Ricciardo and isn't far off. And 2020, 2020 is not in there, but he's great wherever he goes, essentially. He has the experience over these lot. I think that puts him above Leclerc. But is he good enough to go on the same level as Bottas or Webber? You know what? I think so. Yeah, I think so. Next is Max Verstappen. This is another tricky one because, well, 6 years of experience. No, 5 years of experience, 2015 through to 2019. Crash prone, but still potential. 2015, he got like 4th at Kota, and I think somewhere else he got another 4th place that year. 2016, or was Kota 2016 4th place? I think it might have been. No, it wasn't, because that's when he moved to Red Bull. Never mind. Obviously, did decent, I guess, at the start of his 2016 campaign, and then moved to Red Bull, won the race at Spain. The rest is history, really. Kind of gets a couple of wins in 2017. He's better than, as soon as, like, from the second half of 2016 to the end of 2018, he's a better driver than Ricciardo. And then just craps all over Gasly and Albon in 2019. Obviously, he doesn't have as many wins as he does now. Doesn't have any championships. He's better than these lot. He's up here with these lot. I'd put him third. I might move it. It depends how many drivers we fit into this blessed category. If it's only like Hamilton and Vettel and maybe Nico Rosberg, then I might put him up there just to kind of fill the void. But yeah. Oh, look, it's Rio Haryanto. I wonder which tier we're going to put him in. Yeah. What was it? 10, 11 races of Manor. Never outqualified Pascal Wehrlein. Was often a second and a half off the pace. And then his Indonesian sponsors decide they're not going to pay up anymore, so he gets dropped. Not really much to say about him. Kevin Magnussen. A kind of a watered-down version of Romain Grosjean, 2014 to 2019. Gets podium on his debut. Has a very decent 2014 season. Sits out 2015, I've just realised, apart from the one race at Australia, which he was supposed to start, but never did because of an engine failure, because it was the first ever race for McLaren Honda. Moves to Renault for 2016, destroys Jolyon Palmer. Doesn't stay with him for 2017. He goes to Haas for 2017, and he's kind of on the same level as Rosberg, as Grosjean. And is on a similar level in 2018 as well, if not slightly better. 2019... I guess he got one P6 in qualifying. He was kind of Grosjean without the peaks and without the lowest lows. So a less chaotic version of Grosjean, essentially. I'd probably put him just on pure experience below Grosjean, but ahead of Ocon in the 2010s. Sorry, I said in the 2019s. Daniel Ricciardo next. Made his debut in 2011 for HRT. Couldn't really do much, but he still, I think, he wasn't that much better than Liuzzi. And when he did his one race against the ring car for Cayenne, I think he only out-qualified him by like a couple of hundredths of a second and then lost to him in the race. So there's enough said there. He lost to Narain Karthikeyan. He lost to Jean-Eric Vergne in 2012, beat him just in 2013. And then the thing is, people seem to think that he did so much better than Vettel in 2014. But Vettel was actually better in qualifying and was only like 5 or 10 seconds adrift of him on average in the races. So yeah. And then he gets beat by Kvyat in 2015, gets beat by Verstappen in 2016, 2017 and 2018, and doesn't really beat Nico Hulkenberg. I don't know what the hype is around him. Like, oh, he's a nice guy. He's really good for PR. Like, at his prime, he was a very good driver, and he did deserve some of his wins. Like, 2 or 3 of them. But the rest of them, Belgium 2014 was because the 2 Mercedes collided. Canada 2014 was because the 2 Mercedes had brake problems. What was the other race in 2014 he won? Hungary. That was because, well, Hamilton started at the back. It was a chaotic wet race. And Alonso really deserved that win instead of him. Didn't win any in 2015. He won 1 in 2016, I think. No, he was going to win Monaco. He didn't. Did he win 1 in 2016? It might have been like late season, like Malaysia, somewhere like that. I can't remember. 2017, he won, I think, Malaysia. Or was that Verstappen? There was a couple of races at Verstappen. But essentially, like, he won 2018 China and Monaco, and those are arguably his best performances. I mean, Monaco, you could argue that was literally, you put Max Chilton in that car and they win as long as they don't make a mistake. China was good. Made some good moves there, but overall, look at it. This was before he properly fell off. But he's above these lot, just on pure experience. He's above Schumacher, he's above Leclerc, better than Hulkenberg, better than Bottas, better than Webber just on experience. But over the course of the 2010s, I'd argue he wasn't better than Perez. Because Perez performed well everywhere he went, apart from McLaren. Ricciardo didn't perform to the level in HRT. He beat Vergne, you could guess. I mean, Vergne, I think, was the better driver and should have been promoted for 2014, but wasn't. Proved by him thrashing Kvyat at Toro Rosso in 2014 and still not getting the promotion to Red Bull. And then got beat by Kvyat in 2015, got beat by Verstappen, no, he didn't get beat by Hulkenberg, but it was closer than it should have been. So, yeah. Next one, that is that Roberto Merhi? I think that is Roberto Merhi. Mediocre, I guess. Or just, do I put him Met or do I put him in mediocre? Did the most of the 2015 season for Mana Marussia, because that's what they were known as at the time. Better, I mean, he wasn't even better than Will Stevens, to be honest. Will Stevens got their best result at Silverstone in 12th, and I think Merhi was just behind in 13th. He kind of got promoted to F1 a bit too early. I think he only done like one season of like F3 or GP3 before he got promoted to F1. I don't think he did GP2 or... Was it World Series by Renault by that point, or was it still called the Formula Renault 3.5 series? I think mediocre is probably the better place to put him than Meh, because he's just so forgettable. But he's better than Ericsson, I'd say. Sergei Sirotkin, he's in Meh. Did a full season for Williams in 2018. He's one of the only one-season wonders in recent years. Was worse than Stroll overall. He did have some good moments, but overall was just kind of mediocre. He did have an interesting quirk. He's one of the only modern drivers to have an engineering degree or to have a background in engineering. So he was very good with car setups, apparently. So that's why I think he signed for Renault and Mercedes as a test and reserve driver at different points. But it was worse than Giovinazzi, but he was definitely on a level above Merhi. Brendan Hartley came in. He was in that weird Toro Rosso situation at the end of 2017. Came in for end of 2017. Did the whole of 2018, but he was just kind of average, just kind of bang average. Unlucky as well. Got involved in several incidents that weren't his fault, that kind of knocked his confidence. But overall, he was just not that good. Obviously, a fantastic endurance racing driver, but I think he just tried to bring over what he knew from endurance racing, like racing lines, over to F1, and it just didn't work for him. That's what it was. And I think he was also like, how old was he when he made the move over? So I think he was born in 1989. So yeah, he was 30 when he made his, or like 29, 28 when he made his F1 debut, which nowadays is the death sentence. Like, you can't do it. He wasn't as good as Van Dorn, but I think he was maybe worse than Giovinazzi, but a better driver than Sorokin. Next is Jarno Trulli, a veteran driver by this point. Only 2 seasons to go off, 2010 and 2011, where he wasn't as good as Heikki Kovalainen, unfortunately for him, but he wasn't necessarily horrendous. I mean, he was pretty old by this point. He was 36 at the turn of a decade, which is old for an F1 driver who's been racing since the 1990s at this point. He made his debut in 97. Had a lot of experience, but he just kind of, I mean, he didn't even retire. He wanted to continue into 2012, but after the first Jerez test, he got booted out for Petrov because of money. I wouldn't, no, actually, I probably would, but I'd say he's not as good as Van Dorn, but ironically better than Giovinazzi, I'd say, especially the fact that Giovinazzi only did 1 season. Next is Nick Heidfeld. Nick Heidfeld did 2010 for Sauber, did he? No, that was Perez and Kobayashi. I swear he did 1 race for them. No, that was De La Rosa that did the 1 race. Where was he in 2010? Hold on. Did he even race in 2010? No, it wasn't Perez. Perez started. What am I on about? Perez didn't even race in 2010. It was Heidfeld and Kobayashi. Sorry. I just had a complete lack of knowledge there. That was weird. Drove for Renault in 2011. Had that one incident at Hungary where he pulls over to the side and then the exhausts explode in the side of a car and the marshals get debris all over them. And then he kind of just fizzles out after that. Very weird. Not a very weird driver, but his prime was in the 2000s. 2 seasons only to go on. Just like Trulli, but was better than these lot. Better than Stroll, better than Albon, better than George Russell, better than Kubica. I just kind of put him there because he was kind of classic Heidfeld, kind of really not just slightly above average, I'd say. Next is Nico Rosberg. Came in, he came in 2006, so he's 2010 to 2016. He was better than Schumacher in 2010 and 11, but not overly so. And then I'd argue they were much more equal in 2012. He was roughly equal to Lewis Hamilton in 2013, actually. Had a worse 2014 season. Was lucky to still be in title contention at Abu Dhabi, and then it looked like he'd done such a shit job because he had 67-point deficit to Hamilton, but that was because it was double points in the season finale. Hamilton won while Rosberg had a mechanical failure and finished 14th. So that would have been, 17 points instead of 67, so it looks a lot worse than it should have been. 2015, Lewis trounced him, but 2016, he came back. Now, people like to say, especially Hamilton fans like to say, the reason why Rosberg beat him was because Rosberg was actually a really good underrated driver, but he wasn't. If he was a really good underrated driver, we would have seen it before 2016 where he just suddenly pops up and he's better than Lewis Hamilton. It's just because Lewis had a craptacular season and they just want to hide that. A very, very good driver, though. I'd argue, because it's ironic, he only had he had 2 more seasons in F1 in the 2010s than Verstappen did. But I'd argue he was worse than him. Like, Verstappen consistently outperformed his teammates. Consistently, I mean, yes, his teammates were worse, let's be honest. Like, he didn't have Schumacher and Hamilton. But still, I think that Rosberg, he didn't, as a driver, he didn't deserve to win a title. But considering that his overall performance level wasn't good enough to win a title, especially, this is what I've always said, if he was in, let's say, Ferrari or Red Bull at the start of the turbo hybrid era, he wouldn't have got to a point where he'd have been eventually in the Mercedes or in a faster car, like 2017 Ferrari, for example, because he was good, but he wasn't better than the likes of Vettel or Ricciardo or other drivers around that era. He was good, but he essentially capitalised on Lewis having a crap 2016 season. That's why I think he's worse than Verstappen in the 2010s. That's a very interesting take I get, but still. I might actually move both of these. Yeah, I'm going to move both of these two up to hashtag bless, because otherwise there's going to be literally 2 drivers in there. Pedro de la Rosa. He does. Did he do some races in 2010? I think he did do some races at the start of 2010 for Sauber, and then I think, was it Kobayashi? No, I think he might have replaced Heidfeld. No, or Heidfeld replaced him. Yeah, I think he did the first bit of 2010, and then they kind of realised he was a bit average, and then they brought in Heidfeld. 2011, he did the one race replacing Perez at Canada after Perez had his accident, and then for HRT in 2012, I guess he did better than Carl Verkane in 2012, even though he was worse in the standings. I'd say De La Rosa, I mean, he was just like 3 or 2.5 seasons, really. Even 1.5 seasons, you could argue. He wasn't as good as Jarno Trulli. Was he better than Giovinazzi? Not even so. Was he better than Brendan Hartley? I'd say no. But he was better than Sergei Sorokin. Pascal Wehrlein. He obviously, good driver. Made his debut for Manor in 2016. Threw Rio Haryanto into a bucket of water and drowned him, essentially. 2016, the latter part of that year was Ocon, his teammate. I can't fucking speak. So, yeah, I mean, he was good in 2016. Very good in 2017 as well. But didn't get really much chance to prove himself. I'd say he's better than all these lot. Because I think he was better than Gasly, yet he didn't get any chance. I think it's because apparently his attitude stunk. Apparently he was really arrogant and really rude. But there have been drivers who have been arrogant and rude and gotten away with it, essentially, because they're good drivers. Maybe he wasn't a truly generational talent to get away with it, but apparently he did like a test with Force India and was basically fighting Ocon for that 2017 seat, but apparently he was rude, even though he might have been faster. But I'd argue he was better than Ocon in that era, but I think because of his lack of experience, you can't really put him any higher. Esteban Gutierrez made his debut for Sauber in 2013, was utterly awful. Had one decent-ish race at Suzuka, but the rest of the season didn't get a single point when Hulkenberg got about 50. I think the total of points between them was 51 for Hulkenberg and 7 for Gutierrez, and that was only that one race at Suzuka. 2014 against Adrian Sutil, that car was just awful. He couldn't really do much in it, but still, he wasn't that good at all. Since that 2015, does like some reserve work for for Ferrari, and then he comes back with Haas in 2016 and is trounced by Grosjean. He didn't get a single point when Grosjean was busy getting 6th and 7th places and 5th places even at different points of the season. I think he was the king of P11s that season as well, kind of like what Jolyon Palmer was, but he was just so bad. I don't know how he managed to make 3 seasons in F1. I do know how he managed to get 3 seasons in F1. That's money. He's like a simulator driver for Mercedes now. Is he better than Ericsson? I'd even argue no. He was just kind of that bad. Jesus. Next is Timo Glock. 2010 through to 2012 with Marussia / Virgin / that's it. Virgin and Marussia. He was better than who was his teammate in 2010? Lucas Di Grassi. He was better than Di Grassi in 2010. He was better than D'Ambrosio in 2011, and he was better than Pick in 2012. I mean, if you want 3 average or lower than average teammates, there's 3 perfect drivers. But he was, along with Kovalainen, the best of those kind of backmarker team drivers. And then he just retired at the end of 2012 because he could not be asked to do another season in the Marussia, which is completely understandable, considering how good that team was. He was better than Van Dorn, given his machinery. Better than Stroll, better than Albon, because he just had more time than these lot. Better than Kubica, because he was more consistent. Better than Heidfeld, because he had longer. Better than Gasly? No. But I'll put him there. Felipe Massa, 2010 through to 2017, came back from his accident at Hungary in 2009. Was decent in 2010 actually. He was at one point he was kind of in the not the title hunt, but he was kind of on a similar level to Alonso, and then I think Ferrari decided to step in and say, actually, we need to focus on one driver for the title. 2011, he had so many accidents with Lewis Hamilton, most of which were Lewis's fault. 2012, he was miserably off the pace of Alonso. Had a couple of podiums towards the end of the season, but that didn't really resurrect his stock. I don't know how he stayed on for 2013. There should have been someone else going in that seat, whether it be... there were rumours, I think, that Maldonado was going to go for 2014 after he made... But surely it could have been someone they put in for 2013 over him. I think there was rumours that someone was going to go, and I can't remember who it was now, though. Obviously went to Williams in 2014 and he was better at Williams than he was at Ferrari, but still he wasn't overly impressive. And then we initially retired at the end of 2016, but Bottas goes to Mercedes, and instead of hiring another young driver, they decide, let's bring back Massa for another year. And he's not as bad as he could have been, but he overall was better than Stroll, but not much better. He's better than these lot on pure experience. Better. But I'd argue worse than Schumacher. Felipe Nasr is a very similar driver to Pascal Wehrlein. Did only 2 seasons, both at Sauber. Was so much better than Ericsson, yet got screwed over at the end of 2016. Got the 5th place on his debut in Australia. Got 9th place at Brazil in 2016. 2 underrated drives. Just was overall so much better than Ericsson. He was. He's proven that. I mean, in his endurance racing career, I'm pretty sure he's like won 4 Daytona 24s and 1 billion IMSA championships. So he's better than all these lot. Better than that. Where is Wehrlein? I'd argue he's slightly worse than Wehrlein. I'd also argue he's not as good as Ocon. Next is Vitantonio Liuzzi. Another kind of experienced guy. He was mainly a 2000s driver, made his debut, I think, for Toro Rosso in 2005. No, he didn't, because Toro Rosso didn't exist in 2005. Toro Rosso in 2006. No, Red Bull in 2005, sorry. Did a couple of races for them there. I think he intertwined with Christine Clean. 2010, he was at Force India with Sutil. And I think... No, Sutil had... like 1 or 2 amazing qualifyings, but Liuzzi was kind of trailing behind. I think he qualified like fifth at Canada once, but was overall kind of laying in the shadows, and then moved to HRT for 2011 and was better than Narain Karthikeyan and Ricciardo. So I guess Meh is probably the category he goes in. He's better than Della Rosa, he's better than Hartley, better than Giovinazzi, but not better than Trulli. Actually, no, I'd argue he's not even better than Giovinazzi. Karthikeyan next. The Cucumber, the classic Cucumber, didn't do any races in 2010, did 1 race in 2011, the Indian Grand Prix, and then came back with HRT full-time in 2012. Before someone just entered the room I was in then. So, he was very bad, he was very mediocre in 2012. I'd argue is he better than Gutierrez? I'd argue not. Like, genuinely, he was so bad. Jolyon Palmer's next. We have a driver who is 2 seasons again, well, 1.5 really, or 1 and 2/3, should I say, not 2 quarters. The entire of 2016 and the first 2 quarters of 2/3 of 2017. I'd personally say, he was much worse than Magnus and much worse than Hulkenberg. Good pundit, but overall was such a bad driver. Better than Gutierrez, better than Ericsson, better than Merry. Would I put him on the next level with people like Sirotkin? No, he can leave the mediocre drivers. Heikki Kovalainen, obviously 4 seasons for him. Did 2010 through to 2012 with Lotus/Caterham, and then came back with Lotus, the black and gold team, for the last 2 races of 2013 because Raikkonen had quote unquote he went to get back surgery because Lotus weren't paying him. Kovalainen was the best driver of the backmarker drivers in 2010 through to 2012. Always the best of them, pretty much every weekend, apart from like the odd anomaly. And I mean, his career was kind of thrown away after he left McLaren because he was not the greatest in 2009. Better than Stroll, better than Albon, better than Norris, better than these lot, better than Heidfeld, better than Glock, obviously. Yes, I'd say he's better than Gasly, and he can lead the decent run. Adrian Sutil. Oh God. Okay. Good running qualifying in 2010. Had some good drives for Force India in 2010 and 2011. Got done for a GBH charge on the boss of the Lotus Group because he threw a glass at him in a bar. I think it was either in late 2011 or early 2012 because he got fired from Force India. Came back to Force India for 2013 and then drove for Sauber in 2014. His second stint was so cack. It was. The only thing I remember from his 2013 season was him diving up the inside of about 5 people at the hairpin at Monaco. And 2014, that was just nothing. Yeah, obviously, it was part of the accident that caused the death of Jules Bianchi, but it was nowhere near his fault. So, yeah, I mean, based purely on experience and on 2010 and 2011 being somewhat redeeming, he goes above these lot. Actually, I'd argue he's not better than Stoffel Van Dorn. Next is Kimi Räikkönen. So, 2012 through to 2019. Fantastic 2012 season. Fantastic-ish 2013 season. Slightly more watered down, but still very good. From 2014 onwards, though, he was just kind of bang average. Like, Ferrari, 2014, he was awful even. 2015, he was slightly better. 2016, he was slightly better again. 2017, he just got progressively slightly better throughout his entire Ferrari stint. Then in 2019, he kind of is better than Giovinazzi, but do you want a medal for being better than Giovinazzi? Not really. Purely based on experience, he's got to go at least in good. Better than Massa. I mean, he's better than. It's because if you take his peak, he's got to be in like number 2 driver. But because like with Leclerc, for example, luckily he has 2 good seasons, like 2 really good seasons. But that's it. There's nothing else to go off. Whereas Raikkonen, he has 2 very good seasons and then a bunch of average seasons. So does that take the average down and make him worse than Leclerc? I'd argue not, because experience does take into account. But I'd argue that he'd probably go in. Does he go in good, or does he go in number 2 driver? I'd argue he goes in number 2 driver. But not better than Hulkenberg, not better than Bottas and co. Next is Guido van der Garde, or as Peter Brook, one of my fellow podcast hosts on the DRS Train podcast, says, Guido van der Garde, I think, or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce Dutch, surprisingly. Did 1 season with Caterham in 2013. He had a couple of good moments. I remember at Monaco, we nearly got into Q3 in that Caterham. He was very good at his peak, but overall, I think the fact that he didn't have much money, the fact that he was good but he wasn't fantastic, kind of paid into the fact that he didn't get a second season. He was supposed to drive for Sauber in 2015, but Manisha Kaltenborn signed 5 drivers to 2 seats. She signed Ericsson and Nasser, who eventually ended up driving, but she also signed Van der Garde, Sutil, and Simona de Silvestro to deals that they thought were guaranteeing him seats, but they never did, obviously. He's better than Sorokin, better than these lot, better than Liuzzi, better than Giovinazzi, better than Trulli, better than Sutil. I'd argue not better than Van Dorn, though. Next is Karen Chandok. Great pundit, fantastic knowledge. Even better than mine, I'd even argue. Like when he was talking in the Mexican Grand Prix about last year about the Australian drivers, because they were talking about not Liam Lawson, they were talking about Daniel Ricciardo, and they were talking about Australian drivers from the 1970s, and I thought he was going to go on about people like Jack Brabham, what's his name, Tim Schenken and those kind of guys. And no, he's talking about people like Larry Perkins and other guys like that. Brian Maguire, and I was like, Jesus Christ, he does have a lot of knowledge. But he wasn't a good driver. He was mediocre in GP2, got the HRT seat in 2010 because of money. And although he wasn't like horrendous, he was just so mediocre. I don't think he ever beat Senna in qualifying. Admittedly, that car was probably an absolute dog to drive in terms of understeer, but I'd argue that he can go probably ahead of Rio Haryanto, but behind everyone else. Next up is Kamui Kobayashi. Good driver. Competed from 2010 until 2014, or missed out the 2013 season. Did so for Sauber, did so for Caterham. Very underrated. Deserved more of a chance in F1. Didn't get it really, but above all these lot, I'd say isn't good. Better than Nasser based on experience. Better than Ocon. Better than Wehrlein. I'd even argue better than Magnussen. There we go. Next one is Danny Kvyat. Danny Kvyat, 2014 until 2019. Decentish season for Toro Rosso in 2015. Kind of was lucky to get the promotion instead of Verne because Verne did beat him in the points standings. Beat Ricciardo in 2015, no coat, so kind of proved, quote unquote, the haters wrong. But got demoted kind of unfairly, I'd say. I'd still think that although Russia was his fault, China, like Vettel saying, you came in like a torpedo. He just took the inside and you turned, and Raikkonen turned across the both of you, I think. Or was it Vettel who turned across the both of them? I can't remember. So, yeah, he was. If it was anyone other than Max Verstappen coming through, I think they wouldn't have replaced him, but they did. He was decentish for the rest of 2016 and 17. Decentish. I mean, he didn't race in 2018, but came back in 2019 because Hartley was awful. And I think if they'd have put him in the second Red Bull instead of Albon, I think he'd have actually done decently. I don't think he'd have done as well as Verstappen, but I think they would have actually been able to keep him through 2020, just like they did Albon, and he could have done better. But on that, I'd say he was better than Gasly, better than Kovalainen, better than Nasser on pure experience, better than Ocon, better than Wehrlein, better than Magnussen, but I'd probably leave it there. Next is Jenson, my friend, 2010 to 2016, or technically 2017, because that one race at Monaco. He's a championship contender in 2010. He's a championship contender, not a championship contender in 2011, but he's far better than Hamilton. Has a bad 2012 season, has a decentish 2013, has a decentish 2014, has a very good 2015 and 16. I'd argue just purely on his early decade form, he's got to go into the #blessed tier. Better than Rosberg, but I think because his prime was shorter than Verstappen's in that kind of era, he was like 2010 to 2011 and 2015 to 2016. You can't really go 4 seasons, especially when Verstappen had like his in a more concise period. But he's still better than Rosberg. Sebastian Buemi, I've met this guy, really nice guy. Did 2 seasons in the 2010 and 2011 for Toro Rosso. Him and Al-Jaswari were very unfairly treated by Toro Rosso, I think. At least one of them should have stayed for 2012. I believe. Or they should have even replaced Webber, arguably. I'll put them both in at the same time because they're both around the same ranking. I think Al-Jaswari was slightly better, but just on pure experience, I'd put them ahead of Heidfeld and below Glock. Next is Fernando Alonso. He's got to go in #blessed. He's better than Rosberg. He's better than Button. He's better than Verstappen. Do I put him ahead of Vettel? So Vettel has 4 championships, a couple of second places, and I mean he underperformed from 2014 onwards, whereas Alonso outperformed his machinery in 2010, 2011, very much so in 2012 and 2013 and 2014 and 20. Okay, yeah, he outperformed his machinery every single season up until about 2017 and 2018 when he stopped caring. Yeah, I'm going to put him above Vettel. He might have burned bridges, but that doesn't like, I'm talking about best drivers, not best marriage counsellors or best people. Lucas Di Grassi, he's so average. Or not average, so average, so like mediocre. 2010 Virgin, did the entire season but didn't do anything of note. I can't remember a single thing that he did apart from I think he went wide at Korea. Or like had a spin at Korea. That's it. Better than Carl Cahan. I'd even argue. I'd argue slightly better than Gutierrez and maybe Ericsson, but I'd stop there. Just so average. Bruno Senna, slightly less bad, but nowhere near as good as his uncle. I think he did the entire season for HRT in 2010, apart from the British Grand Prix, where he got replaced because he sent an email about Colin Collis to the entire team by accident. Drove for Williams in 2012, got absolutely drop kicked by Pastor Maldonado. I say he's better than Liuzzi, but he's not even better than Giovinazzi, I don't think. Next is Jules Bianchi. Obviously, he died before we had a proper chance to see his potential, but I still think this guy is so overrated. Like, he started competing in like GP2 in 2009. He finished third behind Maldonado and Perez in 2010. He finished, I think, third as well, or second in 2011, and then moved to Formula Renault 3.5 because they realised he wasn't going to win GP2, and he still didn't win that over. I think he didn't even beat Robin Freins in 2012 in Formula Renault. Went to Marussia in 2013, was better than Max Chilton, whoop-de-doo. But the thing is, when you ask people why was Jules Bianchi so good, they say Monaco 2014, and I go, what? The race where only 11 cars finished, like, without any issues, and where everyone behind him had some sort of problem, or if they didn't have some sort of problem, he barged them out the way. Like that move on Kobayashi should have been a penalty. I'm sorry, you don't. It's not NASCAR. You don't just barge people out the way. Kobayashi got significant floor damage from that, and eventually ended up finishing 2 laps behind Bianchi, even though that accident happened on halfway through the race. He lost about 5 seconds a lap due to the damage that Bianchi gave him, and he would have finished in the points instead. He was good, but he was not this future champion that would have been. Oh, he would have been there with his godson at Ferrari with Charles Leclerc. No, he wouldn't. He was not that good. I did a video entirely around that subject. I'd put him. He's better than Senna. He's better than Giovinazzi. He's better than Trulli. He's better than Sutil. He's better than Van der Garde. He's better than them. He's better than Stroll. He's better than these. He's better than. No, I'd argue he's not even better. He's not even better than Albon. There we go. Paul Di Resta. Paul Di Resta gets a lot of hate nowadays. He does. He gets a lot of hate nowadays because of his pants commentary. But from 2011 to 2013, he was a very decent driver. Not blow your socks off, but he was fantastic. He was like a watered-down version of Nico Hülkenberg, and Hülkenberg is himself a very watered-down driver. Did that one race coming back in 2017 as well for Williams. But I'd argue, I mean, he's ahead of Van Dorn, he's ahead of Stroll, he's ahead of these lot. But I wouldn't say he's better than Glock. Carlos Sainz, 2015 to 2019. He's got to go in at least good. Well, he lost to Verstappen, fair enough. But he beat Kvyat. He beat Kvyat again in 2017. He wasn't as good as Hülkenberg in 2018, but he was better than Norris in 2019. I mean, obviously, yes, Norris was a rookie, but still. Better than Ocon, better than Verline, better than Magnussen, better than Kvyat, better than Kobayashi, better than Grosjean, better than Massa. But I'd stop at putting him ahead of Schumacher. Vitaly Petrov, not the best of human beings, supports Putin. I don't like to get into political stuff though, so let's end that there. 2010, 2011 and 2012 drove for Renault in 2010 and in 2011, or Lotus Renault as they were called in 2011, and then drove for Caterham in 2012. Got the result that Caterham needed in 2012 at the Brazilian Grand Prix, but that was because Charles Pic gave it to him, like literally because he knew that he was going to Caterham for next year, so he wanted them to have more prize money. He was trounced by Heidfeld and maybe not Senna in 2011, but he was trounced by Kubica in 2010. he can go above Van Dorn. The last in the row of decent. Is that Charles Pete? No, it's Jerome D'Ambrosio. That's Jerome D'Ambrosio. Did one full-time season in 2011 with Virgin, and then did one race with Lotus in 2012 while Grosjean had his ban. He's not even this high. He's worse than Sutil. He's worse than Trulli. He's worse than Senna. He's worse than Leos. He's worse than Hartley. He's worse than De La Rosa. He's worse than Sirotkin. Right. Worse than Palmer. Worse than Merry. Worse than... No, he's not worse than Degrassi. Or is he? No, he is worse than Degrassi. He's worse than Ericsson. But I'd leave it there. Jean-Eric Verne, underrated driver, drove for Toro Rosso from 2012 until 2014 until he got booted out. He was better than Van Dorn. He was better than Petrov. He was better than Stroll. Better than Bianchi. Better than Albon. Better than purely on experience. This is better than Heidfeld. Better than these two. Better than De Resta. And better than Glock. Next is Max Chilton. Right, he's going to be down this end of the tier list. Is he better than Carfacane? Yes. Is he better than Gutierrez? Yes. Is he better than D'Ambrosio? Yes. Is he better than Ericsson? Yes, but I'd leave it there. Charles Pic. My mates met him. He met him when he was Lotus Reserve in 2014. But again, a mediocre season with Marussia in 2012 was the most overtaken driver in the 2012 season. And in 2013 was just kind of completely anonymous and then just fizzled off the grid. He's better than these. Like, he's better than Carfacane. He's better than Gutierrez. He was better than D'Ambrosio. He was better than Ericsson. He was even better than Chilton. He's better than Degrassi. But that's where I'd leave it. Because he was a decent-ish driver. He was just completely, like, quiet as a mouse. Next is Rubens Barrichello. 2 seasons only to go off for him. And he was quite old. He was 38 when the decade started. Or 37 technically, because his birthday was like May. And I mean, he lost out. I think he was slightly better than Hulkenberg and slightly better than Maldonado across the course. The entire course of 2010 and 2011. He would have been beaten by Maldonado in points if Maldonado hadn't been taken out by Hamilton in Monaco. But Barrichello was a decent driver and was supposed to carry on into 2012, but got fired for Bruno Senna in early 2012. So, yeah, better than those lot, better than De Resta. Actually, no, not better than De Resta. I'd probably put him slightly ahead of Al-Jaswari and Buemi. Will the lad Stevens. 1 season with Manor in 2015 and 1 race with Caterham in 2014. He's not as bad as Rio Haryanto. He's not as bad as... he's actually got to be better. I think he's better than Merry. But he's not better than Jolyon Palmer. These two are just quite intertwined. Lastly, and not least, Pastor Maldonado. This is actually probably going to be one of my longer explanations because I think Maldonado is one of the most underrated drivers in modern Formula 1. I did an entire video on this. The most misunderstood driver in F1 history is what the video is called. His 2011 season obviously would have beaten Barrichello in the points if not for that Monaco race because he was running 6th or 7th. I can't remember which place it was. And he's battling with Lewis Hamilton with like a couple of laps to go, and Hamilton just decided to send it up the inside of Sandoval and just not expect him to just somehow give him some room. Like, it's Sandoval, you can't do that. So Maldonado turns in. Lewis says Maldonado's just turned into me when he didn't. When it's convenient how every single time he had an incident with Massa earlier in that race, the hairpin where Massa quote unquote turned into him. It was just him lunging up the inside of the Hello's hairpin and just being an idiot. Maldonado in 2012. Even if you take out the things that weren't his fault, he doubles his points tally and is like 8th in the driver's standings in the 8th quickest car, which should be like 15th or 16th in the standings. Obviously had that win in Spain, which was legendary. Should have got a podium in Valencia. Again, Lewis takes him out. People say, "Oh, it was Maldonado's fault." Lewis literally forces him completely off the road, and people say, "Oh, well, he shouldn't have rejoined unsafely." Well, he didn't rejoin unsafely. If Lewis had given space to the car on the inside, like he never did in his McLaren days, they wouldn't have made contact. And people say, "Oh well, he should have stayed off track then." So you want Maldonado to cut the corner, go ahead of Lewis, get the position back, just because Lewis can't be bothered to give anyone any room. It's Lewis's fault, 100%. I'm trying to think of other things. Singapore, he was running 3rd when his hydraulics went. Abu Dhabi, he was running third when his KERS failed and he finished fifth. Like, he could have got several other podiums. Very good on the street circuits. Very good, basically everywhere else. Criminally underrated driver. 2013, he was on a similar level to Bottas, not in qualifying, but in the races they were actually quite close. 2014, when both drivers finished, him and Grosjean were actually quite closer than people thought. And at the end of 2015, he was one of the best of the rest drivers. So, like, he was picking up 6th and 7th and 8th places in a Lotus that probably didn't deserve those. And if you get rid of Grosjean's podium, which was only because Mercedes gave Lotus the party mode engine modes, then I think he would have had a similar points tally to Grosjean. So he's better than these. Like, he's better than Kovalainen. He's better than Felipe Nasr. He's better than Ocon. He's better than Wehrlein. He's better than Kobayashi. He's better than Grosjean. Better than Massa. Better than Sainz. Better than Schumacher. I'd even argue because of his like longevity, he was better than Charles Leclerc. Going up into here, this is where it starts to get. Can I put him above Kimi Raikkonen? Raikkonen has so much more longevity, but also the longevity. Like, Raikkonen had 2 good seasons. Maldonado had a fantastic 2012 and a really good 2015. And a decent enough 2011. You know what? I'm going to do that. You know what? I think when you get to like Hulkenberg, he was consistent. He was really consistent, and you can't really do that. But that, for me, I think that completes my tier list. No more drivers to rank, obviously. That's all the 62 full-time drivers in the 2010s. So the worst driver is Rio Haryanto. I'm gonna move some of these around because we've got some tiers which don't have enough drivers on them. D'Ambrosio was cack. Ericsson wasn't that cack, so well, that's fine. So Lewis Hamilton, the best driver of the 2010s. I think we can all agree with that, even if you're the biggest Lewis Hamilton hater. I mean, I'm not a Lewis Hamilton hater. I just don't think that he's as good as people say he is. I did a video on that. Alonso, better than Vettel, which might be a controversial opinion. Verstappen being 4th, ahead of a champion, or 2 champions, maybe, or one that wasn't a champion in the 2010s, but yeah. Perez, then Ricciardo. That might be controversial, but Ricciardo is so overrated in F1 because people say he's got 8 wins. Yeah, McLaren win in 2021 Monza was basically handed to him because they did team orders. Norris would have probably won. You had 2018 Monaco handed to him because the track circumstances. Admittedly, that's less egregious than other ones, but 2018 China, fair enough. A couple of ones in 2017 that I forgot. 2016, a couple of ones that I forgot again. But it's 3 wins in 2014, prime examples of race wins that don't belong to him, or race wins that he didn't get on pure merit. Brake failures for Mercedes in Canada. What else in 2014? There was the collision between the 2 Mercedes in Belgium, and just 2014 Hungary was a chaotic race. Webber, he just didn't have enough time to really go any higher. Bottas just was too mediocre for most of it. Hulkenberg underrated. Maldonado underrated. Raikkonen just didn't have a good. After 2013 was. Like, if it wasn't for 2012 and 2013, he'd be down in good with Leclerc and Schumacher. Schumacher quite underrated. Sainz, Massa, Grosjean, Hulkenberg, Kvyat. I actually switched Magnussen and Wehrlein. Ocon, Nasr, Kovalainen, Gasly, Verne, Glock, Di Resta, Barrichello, Alguersuari, Buemi, Heidfeld, Kubica because of his 2019 season. Russell, Norris, Albon, Bianchi, Stroll, and Vitaly Petrov. Van Dorn, Van der Harde, or whatever you can say in Dutch. Sutil, and I said Stroll. I nearly said Stroll there. Trulli, Giovinazzi, Senna, Liuzzi, Hartley, Della Rosa, Sirotkin, Palmer, Stevens, Merry, Pick, Degrassi, Chilton, Ericsson, D'Ambrosio, Gutierrez, Karthikeyan, Chantok, and Rio Haryanto. Yeah, I think that concludes that ranking. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you think I've rated some drivers too highly? Do you think I've rated some drivers not high enough? Yeah, let me just have a quick through. So the top 10 would be Hamilton, Alonso, Vettel, Verstappen, Button, Rosberg. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10. So Bottas is the 10th fastest driver. Anyway, I think with that being said, I've got to round this out now. So without further ado, I'm Nedzo, and I'll see you all later. Bye!